So my name is Rachel Hudson. I was raised in Hillsboro, Ohio. My grandparents got custody of me when I was 13. Prior to that, I was bounced around. My father wasn't in the picture growing up, and that's been a generational thing of absent dads and broken homes. So I was bounced around, and there was a physical altercation with me and my mother that happened when I was 13, and that's what led to my grandmother saying, I'm getting custody of you, you're not going back. And even her getting custody of me, I know that she rescued me from going into foster care, and her and my grandfather were foster parents as well. So that was something that I was just around or aware of at a young age. My grandfather is my grandma's third husband. He's not my biological grandfather, but he had been around since I was a child, so he was my grandfather. I used to be a grandpa's girl, but when I moved in at 13, there was something that changed, and he was not on board with having a mouthy, defiant, and rebellious 13-year-old coming into his house, and so we bumped heads. And so that was hard to think that I was getting rescued and be excited in a way, because I still wanted the relationship with my mom, but knowing that that was over, especially in court when my mom didn't even show up to fight for me and she just kind of discarded me. It was nice to know that my grandma was there and that she loved me, but to know that my grandfather didn't necessarily want me there. He loved me, but that was not home, and that was made very clear in the beginning was difficult. And from a young age, I wanted to be a mom. I always looked forward to being a mom. Parenthood to me meant having that just unwavering love and unconditional love, that you could give someone unconditional love and you could receive it. So I always looked forward to that. I wasn't in any rush, but I always wanted that. I also wanted to be married, and I wanted my own family because it seemed as though I never quite fit into mine. And so when I got older, my first child was a surprise. Me and his dad were already separated. We had had no contact. I just found out months after we had ended our relationship that I was pregnant. And I remember I thought that I was actually having a miscarriage with my first son. And immediately I regretted even being upset at the news. And I remember praying to God and saying, God, please let me keep this baby. And everything was fine. And he was a bundle of joy. My second son was planned. And with his dad, we went to high school together, found each other after high school. Everything was great. We thought we were going to get married. And we didn't always get along. So there was that. And I found myself in the same situation of my mother, of my aunt, of my grandmother, of having children out of wedlock and raising children as a single parent. And that was a cycle that I had wanted to break. After my second son was born, I knew that the relationship between his dad and I was not healthy, and that wasn't something that I wanted to subject my children to, because I was subjected to that growing up, to people arguing, people saying that they love each other, but they were very hateful to each other, verbally, emotionally, sometimes physically, not my grandparents, but not them physically, but others. And so I knew that we were going to be ending our relationship. I was just really working up the courage to go from being a 2-income household to 21 and a single mom of 2 children that were under 3, because my boys are a year and a half apart. And during that time, I became pregnant again with my second son's dad. And the minute that I found that I was pregnant, it's like I was cheated of joy, and I was cheated of that experience. And it just hurt, because I love being a mother. I'm a foster mom as well. I love being a mother. I love parenting. I received that opportunity to experience that unconditional love, to give it to these little humans that willingly accepted it. And they give it back so freely, they give it back so freely. And every hard thing that I've been through, having my children has saved me. It made life worth living before I became closer to God, because I was always searching for him from a young age. And so when I found out that I was pregnant with my third child, it was hard because instantly abortion came up in my mind, and it was something that I had always been against, that I had never wanted. Being a mother was part of my identity, but I felt as though I had to make a decision, and I felt as though if I had my child, that I would be I felt as though I would be sentencing myself and my other two children to kind of the same hell that I had worked so hard to get away from with my family and their relationships. And I almost felt as though, and this isn't true, but I almost felt as though my son's dad got me pregnant on purpose to try and trap me, make me think that I needed him and had to rely on him. And I was scared, and I didn't think that I could do it. And the more that I thought about it, the more that I looked at my other two sons and thought, I've been stressed about how can I go to my income making, I think, $13.50 an hour and taking care of them to 3. There's just no way. There's no way. And so instantly I let that fear drive me. I had known that I had had a family member that had gotten an abortion previously too. So I was desensitized to it in a way, because it was like I knew somebody else that I loved and respected and cared for, and I knew that getting an abortion didn't ruin her life per se. And I say that loosely because I don't know what she struggled with, and I know it wasn't easy, but I saw that she was alive and that she was nice to me, and I just saw it as an option, especially knowing somebody else had done it. So I can't even remember what I did first, if I looked up where there was a clinic at, because I didn't know anything about it. There surely wasn't one in my small town. I don't know if I told my son's dad first, but I do know that I just made it up in my mind that I'm doing this, I have to do it fast. And I kind of detached myself from the pregnancy, and I didn't look at the pregnancy as there was a child there. I just looked at, this is a situation and I need to get rid of this situation. When I told him, my son's dad, he definitely wasn't happy with it. He wasn't on board. He wanted to have another child, and that made me even more suspicious and made me feel even more alienated because of how volatile our relationship was at the time. I had him go with me. We drove up there in silence, not talking to each other. The tension you could cut with a knife. We got there. We definitely didn't tell anybody else what we were doing. We got there. There was an armed guard that came out to the car to get you. And the whole situation was traumatizing. From the drive, even. And I remember the drive up there that I had hoped that he would stop us. That he would turn around. That he would tell me I was wrong. That he would tell me that it was going to be okay. All my life, I just wanted that person to say, it's going to be okay. You're going to get through this, or something, some glimmer of hope. Something to have faith in. And I remember thinking that and just being silent and not having that, and him just driving. And when I got out of the car, I remember that there were, I'm going to say this word, that there were Christians across the street. And as somebody that was saved, that was baptized, that who loved the Lord, I felt like I was being condemned. And I felt like I was being ostracized by that community. Because they were across the street and they had megaphones. I want to say they had some sort of music playing. They had signs. And they were just shouting at you. And it was so overwhelming. And it's almost like it made you want to run into the building. And I know one of the things was like, don't do this. And so the first thing that I want to say with part of this is that if there's anybody that's thinking about an abortion, or anyone who's gotten one, and for those people that think that they are serving God, God is love, and there's nothing that is loving about shouting at someone and not just having your arms open to people. And I almost wonder if that scene would have been different, if that would have made me go and walk over there, because there was no one forcing me to go inside. There was no time constraint to go inside. God's Holy Spirit guides you. The forces of darkness are what drive you. So if you're being driven to something, or you feel that there's a rush, that's not of God. So I wonder if those people across the street would have just said, before you go, can I pray with you? If they would not have shouted, if they would have said, give us just 2 minutes first, something. If one of them because there were a lot of people out there, if one of them or two of them just would have waved me over, or just had their arms open for an embrace, I think that I would have ran towards them and then ran towards God instead of running towards that building seeking refuge. And so I went inside. And going inside, I remember there were a couple things. They make you get an ultrasound. And I want to say that I was 4 weeks, and I didn't want to get an ultrasound because I had detached myself. That was part of, and growing up, I learned to do that a lot, detach myself from my emotions. I actually don't like to cry. I don't like to be emotional because it's me relinquishing control. And that detachment is a safety mechanism. So I didn't want to see, because I felt like if I waited, if I thought about it, I wouldn't do it, because it was against everything that I believed in, that I stood for, that I loved. I was murdering a child, and it was legal to take life of a child. And so I didn't want to think about it, and I didn't want to be given that time. So I went in and I got the ultrasound. And I remember they wanted you to go home and then come back the next day. And I knew if I would have went home and I wouldn't have come back the next day. I wouldn't have. Because I would have had time to think. Maybe for somebody to reach out, something. And so I said, no, I'm doing this today. I'm not coming back tomorrow. I'm doing this today. Again, nobody fought me on it. Nobody fought me on it. So they made the little arrangements and allowed me to do it that day. So I'm sure there was some paperwork and something else. And again, my boyfriend at the time, my youngest son's dad, was silent. And I don't blame him. But again, first I want to say, because I don't want this to seem like I'm placing blame, but I want to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I made a decision out of fear. I made a decision about a child, about a life that was a gift from God, and not just a gift for me. A child was a gift for the world. That child was a gift for you as well. And I made you to feel as though there were other forces driving, but I made you feel as though I was the one making the decision, and that you could not have say in your child. And so he hadn't said anything, and but he was going with me, and we were young. We were only 21, and our son was born in July, and I think that this was December or January. So he, even though he was silent, I know that he cared for me at that time, and he was just trying to be supportive. And so he stayed with me, and then we had to go to a different floor. I remember at the elevator, because nobody tells you what's going to happen when you walk in those doors, and people need to know what happens in those doors so they don't ever walk through them. At the elevator, we went to get out. We might have been holding hands, but we went to get out. And somebody told us that he couldn't go with me, that you weren't allowed to have anyone with you. And so, such a decision as that, literally the death of a child at that moment, we were just two kids that were told that we had to leave each other. Two kids making a decision about the life of a child, and something that, I almost feel even at 21, we were adults. But both of us came from broken homes, so we were adults, but we did not have the experience or the maturity, definitely not the discipleship or the spiritual maturity to know and be able to grasp the decision that we were making. And so somebody tells us when I get off of the elevator that he can't go with me. And again, that was like the last moment that I was like, inside, it was like, I was just reaching for him or just like screaming for him to say something, but I couldn't get anything out. And we just looked at each other. And I don't know if the door shut first or if I just kept walking. I don't know, but that was last time we saw each other while I was still carrying our child. And then so you go to this room. I went to this room, my experience. It was cold, it was bright. I did not want to be there. They had me lay down. I was nervous. A nurse tried to be comforting as much as you can in that kind of situation. I don't know if they told me what was going to happen. They definitely don't tell you in detail what happens. I've only learned more about the process the older I've gotten. And then I remember that there was a doctor that came in. They told me about what they were going to do. The nurse volunteered to hold my hand, and so I held a stranger's hand, which again was just a false sense of comfort, and all of it just felt wrong. And I remember that hearing the machine and being there, again, I just wanted to get up. I did not want to be there, but I just felt like I was stuck. It was very quick. And then afterwards I went upstairs to another room, and they had these recliners, these lazy boys. They brought you snacks. They brought you medicine, I think, to help prevent you from bleeding. They brought you soda, asked how you were. And I remember that is definitely another trauma because it was an open room. And I get a righteous anger thinking about it. I get a righteous anger thinking about it because it's an open room that's meant to be comforting. It reminded me of I don't want to dare compare this to a spa or anything like that. It's nothing like that. But I could not get over what had just happened, and I was bawling my eyes out. Bawling. And I'm in a room full of women who had just killed their children as well. And we're being treated like we're at a spa. And these other women are talking and carrying on, sharing information. And I was just crying and just weeping. And I almost felt like I was gonna go psychotic because I'm like, how are these people just okay right now? Or how are they pretending to be okay? And some women had been farther along. Some women had been there multiple times. And it all was just wrong. And it was upsetting that this was something that was allowed. And that there was no going back. That at that point, it was definitely too late. And I was up there for just the amount of time that they made you stay. I don't know if it was a half hour. And afterwards, I went back downstairs, reunited with my son's dad, and we drove home. I thought that when I went into it, I thought that getting an abortion was going to be the answer, the solution to a problem, which my child was never a problem to begin with. But instead, it was an action that had grave consequences. Even though I had said that I wanted to leave my relationship prior to that, God is a redeemer, and everybody can just find their way when we turn to him. And so I don't know what the future would have held, but that abortion definitely was the nail in the coffin. And even though we tried to make it work, it was more trauma. It was more distrust, blame, shame, resentment, guilt. I don't even feel like we ever really talked about it, let alone healed from it. I thought that coming here that I had healed from it. And I was quickly reminded that there's a difference between suppression and healing. That I know what I know. I mean, of course, hindsight's 20/20, and if I could go, I would have never made that decision. And now I would talk anybody and everybody out of it. Beforehand, I had a thought of, well, maybe under certain circumstances, and would that be better than certain situations that children are born to? But every child that is born for, every child that is conceived is for a reason and has a purpose. And it's not our decision to be made on if they get life or not. And I guess the only other thing that I would say is that this just needs to be talked about more. I've slowly started to open up to some people, and it's different how the conversation just takes that turn. And some of it has been with people that I've known for quite some time, and I'll say, okay, well, I'm going to get deep for a minute. Let me just get this out. And a couple times that I've done that, more times than not, that has then turned to somebody sharing with me that they have had one also. There are a lot of children whose lives we cannot get back. And everyone that I have talked to that I know that has had one has regretted it. You can avoid that trauma, that regret, and you don't have to be fearful of any situation of having any child. Fear is not of God, and it's not your portion. And I wish that I would have known that earlier on. And if you've had an abortion, I remember that I went to some dark places, and I felt like my abortion was something that took me away from God. It was like I searched all my life for him and loved him, but now that I did this, he's not going to forgive me. There's no way. And so I would do all these acts just to try and make myself feel better and be kind, almost as though I could, not that I wanted to earn salvation, but I wanted to honor my child, and I didn't know how to. I was even a surrogate twice. And I guess I felt like, not that it would ever replace my child's life, but I took a life away and then I brought in 2 lives. So that's not the way it works. And I will say that I was grateful for military training of all places that I had in Texas, and there was a group of girls, and one of them was going to school. I think she was going to a seminary school, but I'm not positive, but she was a believer. And I remember somehow opening up to them, and I remember them just covering me and praying for me and letting me know that God forgave me. And I felt it. And so that is God. And when Jesus died on the cross, he looked at all of us and knew every decision that we would make. And he still made the decision to shed his blood for us. And so I would just want to share that with anyone, because I do feel forgiveness, and I feel such joy when I think about the fact that I will still get to see my child in heaven someday. I hate that I made the decision that I did, but I've always said that your test can be your testimony. And so I'm always happy to share any decision that I've made and my testimony, and in hopes of it blessing someone else, whether it be to stop them from a decision or to let them know that they're not alone, because I know that that's what God wants us to do and to do more of. There is a Father that loves us unconditionally, and no, he doesn't walk in the flesh with us, but he's always with us. And that's how we get reminded of that love, is through how we love each other and how we care for one another. And so I'm grateful for all of the people and for this ministry that is doing just that and showing love, and that there is life after this decision. We want to stop as many people as we can from making that terrible decision. But for those people that have, you are loved, you are seen, and you're forgiven. And it's not a weight that you have to carry once you give it to God. So at first I named my child Sam, for short for Samuel out of the Bible, because I didn't know the sex, if Sam was a boy or a girl, so I felt like that was neutral. And I have another child that has a neutral name here on earth, so it was fitting. But especially being here this weekend, and I've always leaned more toward my child being a girl, but I wasn't positive. But I felt here in the spirit this weekend that my child is definitely a little girl. That is my baby girl that's in heaven. And what I feel like was stolen. Everything. I mean, everything. Parenting has been everything to me. I could sit here for days on end and not shut up about the joy of being a parent and raising up a child and getting to see every season of their life. And being a parent, it's a responsibility and a job and a ministry that God has blessed me with. But I didn't realize I would compare it to teaching. With teaching, you go, you get your education, you get your degree, and then you have students that you teach. I don't think you ever anticipate that the student is going to teach the teacher. The teacher already has the credentials. My children teach me so much, and there's something to be said for the innocence of a child, and when they and their purity, and when they teach you, and even the lessons, when they're able to forgive, when they're able to love, when they're able to see that you're hurting and they want to nurture you. They're gifts. Everything about them is a blessing. And so any abortion, any life loss is, my family lost that. My kids lost having a sibling, an older sibling that could have shared giftings with them, taught them things, been there to comfort them, the way that my boys get along and love on each other. My oldest son taught my youngest son to swim in the pool, and will be there if they'll be playing outside, and one of them will come inside and say, oh, he hurt himself, so I'm getting a Band-Aid. My oldest one could have had that with, well, my boys now could have been that for my youngest one. And so we missed out on that. And I'm just now becoming aware of spiritual giftings and ways that I am, my Father has fine-tuned me to be able to help people. And so my children, I'm learning things about them, they're learning things about themselves. And so who's to know what gifts that child would have had, what answer to a person's problem or the world's problem that they could have solved. And then our relationship. I am close to God. I finally realized, because I'm the only one in my family that attends church regularly, that has really sought God. And I don't want that to sound judgmental. I just mean I've always had a heart knowledge of God. I've never had a head knowledge. So I didn't grow up in church. I didn't grow up reading the Bible. I didn't grow up praying with my family or anything. I have been that person in my family, and now for my children. I would go to church sometimes so empty and then leave empty. And I always wondered what I was missing. And now what I've realized is, and I found this through other ministers and ministries, is I was missing being edified. I was experiencing, there's a pastor out of Texas that calls it a ministerial malpractice. I would hear all the feel-good messages, or I would hear the condemning messages. You're not doing this, so you're going to hell. And that's not what God wants for us. So I was not being edified. I was not being discipled. And I had never, growing up, all the churches I had been to, all the years that I had been to church, even church groups, I had never felt the presence of the Holy Spirit in any of those houses. And so now in this last season, I've learned what it means to, and I'm still learning, I'm still growing, I'm always growing, but I've learned that God just wants us to have a relationship with him, and what it means to abide in God, to be in his presence, to hear from him. My youngest son's dad hasn't experienced that. And so who knows what that relationship could have been, but through the abortion, it was a means to an end, and it was definitely the death of our relationship. And who knows where he would be at with God and in ministry right now had that not happened. So we lost a lot. We lost everything. These are more happy tears than sad tears, because it's going to be a joyous moment. And so when I get to meet my baby girl in heaven, first I'm going to say I'm sorry. I know that I'm forgiven. And I feel that warm embrace. I almost feel like she would say, "For what, mommy?" and just be waiting to brush it off. But I would still say I was sorry, and that I definitely made a mistake, and that I love her. And now I'm just excited to get to know her. I see myself just sitting down after embracing her, not letting go, but just sitting down and just wanting to hear about everything. And just, and it sounds childlike, but, and some people that know me would probably be like, this is not Rachel to hear this, but I want to frolic. I'm not a frolic. But I want to frolic in fields with my child. And just get that time. And I look forward to it. I look forward to it.